Hi everybody, this is Tom with the LEC preview of the Summer Split Playoffs first week. It is the year 2022, of course, and to address first things first, I know I said I was going to do the Best in the West episode with Veteran, ranking tier list and looking forward to the playoffs. We were going to record on Wednesday, but then I got struck by burn on the internet, so my internet didn't function. Then we were going to record on Thursday and publish it today on the day of the playoffs. But Veteran seemingly disappeared when the world needed him most, just like the Avatar. Hopefully, I'll be able to unearth him for a episode to discuss the first week of playoffs. But I'll keep you posted on that. Just keep a lookout on my Twitter to see if the episode appears. So, with that said, I will still do my own tier list portion for the playoffs and then discuss the teams a bit and do the preview. But first, I'm going to show you the top 10 of my LEC Super Fantasy lobby. There you go. Faramir is in top with a pretty sizable lead, I would say. But the big drop-off is definitely between number 9 and number 10. As you can see, there's almost 200, well, more than 200 points in difference there. So that's where the real break is. And in between there, maybe there are still some shifts possible in the last 3 weeks of these playoffs. Now, let's go to the tier list. So heads up first, I think for me, tier lists are always relative, but also I think I'm looking at how would they fare at a world stage, right? So, for example, if top lane is like super stacked in the world and LEC doesn't have world-class players, then I'm not gonna have a top tier LEC player in the top lane. So I'll just pull up the top lane first. There we go. As you can see, I don't think that the LEC has any world-worthy top laners. My best bet is Broken Blade at this point. I know for G2 he is a big carry and he does not play as well on like the tanky champions, and G2 plays a lot through the bot lane. I still think Broken Blade has the biggest playmaking potential, which is what is required of him. So I think in terms of what the team needs for him to do, he fulfills that role the best. If he would be as consistent, if like he would have to play tanks, like an Ornn, for example, I would say that he can be bumped up to the S+. But so far, that's not what G2 does, and the few times that they have done it, he hasn't looked too hot on it. So overall, Broken Blade is probably the best top laner that we have at the moment. I should also say, by the way, if you saw my All-Pro votes and think, hey, this is very different from what you voted with your All-Pro votes, well, obviously, playoffs are a very different scenario because you have this situation where the All-Pros of the 8 weeks of competition, where week 1 should be as relevant as week 7, but obviously heading into playoffs, you're just going to look at the shape of the final weeks, plus you're going to weigh in experience, you're going to weigh in, is this a player who steps up when best of fives come around and when they matter? So there are going to be shifts there, just to give you that heads up in halfway through. Odo Amne, I think, had a bit more of a rough split compared to his previous split. I think he was still solid. Top lane is a very weak role at the moment in EU. I think there's no hiding that. I do expect that Odo Amne will step it up in the playoffs because he is a very reliable player when the pressure is on. We saw that in the spring split as well. I do think, he has had a few moments where he completely inted, but then again, the split was complete chaos, so I think that you can say that for basically every player in the LEC. Overall, I still think that with his experience, with his versatility, Odo Amne will be a very reliable factor in the playoffs for Rogue, even though, as we'll discuss later, I do think Rogue will lose their first game against Mad Lions. But that aside, I think Odo Amne is, as Malphite would say, rock solid. I've Wunder and Relevant in the B tier, which means serviceable, they do what their team requires them to do. Wunder in the first half of the split was very good for Fnatic, often with his Gragas particularly, would keep them in games that they otherwise would lose. And yeah, he also dropped off a bit towards the end of the split, but I think come playoffs, he'll be once again full focus. We've seen Wunder just what he's capable of. We've seen that this year. We saw in the spring towards like the end of the regular split and at the start of playoffs, he once again was that stable factor. I do expect him to be that again. I don't expect any big carry performances for them. I also think everybody on Fnatic is going to be hampered by the fact that this is a very disjointed team. but I'll talk about that a bit later when I discuss the teams in particular. Irrelevant, solid player, tank player, obviously, for Misfits who play around their bot and mid a lot, but I think he's fine. He does his job well. I voted him for Rookie of the Split, actually. I think he did a very good job in being or developing rather into a player that Misfits could rely on to be a stable factor in their team, where sometimes jungle or Veteo even in the early weeks of the split was more of a liability. So I think Irrelevant is solid. I don't expect anything wild from him in the playoffs, but he's not the player who needs to do that right now. He just needs to be the stable player, have his rookie year, sit that out, develop as a player, and then maybe next year you can experiment a bit more with the knowledge that he has gained. And then in C tier we have Armut and Finn, two players who I think are holding back their team a little bit. Armut, obviously, this split was much better compared to his previous splits in the regular portion. People have pointed it out, and rightfully so. He did play better. Also has to be noted that he was on a team that was winning, and he played champions like Gwen, who was completely broken. He did play well on them. I still think, even though he had that performance, I would normally put him into D tier because his champion pool is just terrible. And I think for playoffs, I'll put him in C tier because he is a player who generally steps up when it matters, which is in playoffs. So normally I'll put him in, if he had a larger champion pool, it would probably be in B tier because then you can have this reliable team fight factor, this person who can find the flanks and set up like we've seen in the past with his Gnar or with Wukong when that was meta. I think you could see him having that big impact in the team fight stage. Now I think he'll have to rely on getting maybe a champion like a Gwen, or if he's on an Ornn, I don't think he's going to be playing particularly well. So that's why he's a C tier for me. And then we have Finn. I think Finn started the split very good. He did pretty well there. I think he dropped off towards the end, and I also think that traditionally in best of 5 scenarios, Finn has not performed very well, which is why he's my C tier. I don't think he's going to be D tier. I don't think he's going to be straight up griefing the games, and that his teammates have to compensate for what he brings on the map. But even though he has a wider champion pool than Armut, his performance has dropped quite significantly, and I'm a bit worried about possibly teams exploiting that. For example, if Fnatic Wunder can play carries, maybe that's what's gonna happen. Then we go to the jungle role. Jungle, as you can see, a bit more spread out. I do think Elyoya is the best jungler in the LEC. He can play basically whatever is needed of him. He's also very good at finding opportunities to get his team ahead on the map. I wouldn't say he's as good at punishing enemies as Jankos is, who is one tier below him, but Elyoya is overall, I would say, a more versatile player. Also has to be said that this meta suits him pretty well in what he needs to do. He can be a heavy ganker, and he can find his opportunities to exploit what the enemy jungler is doing wrong pretty decently. So overall, the most well-rounded player for me. I think obviously the standout with Elyoya is that he pairs well with Niski, and those two are just very clever at finding ways into the enemy jungle, getting Elyoya a lead and snowballing that throughout the game. So I think overall, Elyoya would be the best jungler in the LEC in the playoffs. Jankos, very close, was very debating, should I put him S tier, should I put him A tier? I think Jankos is a very good jungler. Overall, he did struggle in this split a bit in the early game with finding ways of knowing what to do or what his team needs, which is normally what Jankos shines at, which is why I just put him in A tier, but I wouldn't have any problem with anybody putting him in S tier as well, because Jankos is a very experienced jungler who you can see. As I said, Elyoya isn't very good at punishing what the enemy does wrong. This is where Jankos shines. As soon as they overstep, he will communicate with his team and say, hey, we need to go there, we need to do this, and that's a way for him to get his carries, Caps and Broken Blade ahead very effectively. So I think that's what Jankos does very well. I just think, if we're ever getting to a position in this meta where he needs to pivot and play a carry champion, which I don't think is really gonna happen. But there's a possibility that you will have to throw a curveball at the opponent, right? I don't think Jankos is gonna step up there, which is where I see Elyoya stepping up for his team in that regard. Markoon has that factor of Elyoya well. I think he has the potential to carry him. I would put him behind Jankos, so like is A tier, but like lower A tier, if that makes any sense. I just didn't want to make 20 different tiers to flesh it out specifically, right? I think Markoon has been a big prodigy this year. Many people are very excited about him, and rightfully so, because he's very good at very aggressive gameplay, doesn't show any fear, and knows the limits of his champions very well, I have to say. Very good carry jungler. I think the one thing he struggles a bit more with is being like the support jungle, like the helping your teammates, but which Jankos does so much better. So there are moments that Markoon still messes up a bit, but overall he's a very solid jungler. I think he does very well what his team needs. You have Nuke in the mid lane, who we'll get to in a bit, who's a bit more of the supporting mid lane, I would say, in most games, and he works together pretty decently with Markoon in that regard. So very clever jungler overall in this pathing. Not too inventive, but that will come with the years. Just stable overall. Then we have Razork in B tier. People will probably say, why Razork B tier? Shouldn't it be at least like C, D, or F or something like this? I think Razork in his core is a very good jungler still. I think the problem for me with Razork, which is why I put him in B tier, which is serviceable, is that he has ideas similar to what everybody in Fnatic is doing that are very disjointed from what the rest is doing. I think for Razork, the most important part will be clear communication with his mid laner, Humanoid, but that's obviously takes two to tango, or even with his top laner Wunder, and also that takes two people to figure out, right? So I think Razork has good ideas about the game, and if people play along with his ideas, things will work out. He just has a bit of a difficult time adapting to what teammates want, because all those teammates have their own ideas as well, which do not align, so he has to juggle that. So I'm not going to punish him too hard for that. We saw in the final week of the LEC regular split, Razork stepping up in the moment that were needed most, which I very much respect very highly. I don't think Fnatic is going to get very far in the playoffs, if I'm very honest. We'll get to that in a bit. But at the same time, I don't think it will be because of Razork. I think it will be because the team as a team is failing. Malrang C tier. Definitely a big fall from grace for Malrang this split, as we discussed on the last episode of Best in the West as well. I think for Razork, or for Malrang, that gank heavy playstyle has been kind of figured out, and you could see that other junglers were consistently out jungling him. Now, I do think that in the playoffs, he will step it up a bit. I'll give him the credit because I saw him do it in the spring split as well. He was pretty effective still at his style. So I do think that Rogue will have found ways to enable him a bit more. We did see in the last week a bit of the glimmer again of what Malrang is doing when he's playing Jarvan. So if he gets his hand on like a Jarvan, he's fine. Overall, though, I would still say he's a bit of a liability for the team, given that he is not very consistently pulling off what he did in the spring split, and he's been exploited and has had to rely on his very good laners, Larsen and Odoamne, and Comp and Trimby in the bot lane even, to pull the game back in the team's favor. And then we have in D tier, we have Zanzara. Obviously, Zanzara has had a big benefit that champions like Trundle were meta, Poppy was meta, he even whipped out as Karner one game. But overall, I think Zanzara has proven to be a bit of a downgrade for Misfits in terms of pure jungling. Obviously, Misfits brought him in for the team atmosphere, so there's probably going something on behind the scenes. So as a person, obviously Zanzara is a fantastic guy. I just think that he's very easily exploitable in this meta. You could even see you can even give him something like a Trundle, and he's not the best Trundle player in the league. I think a player like Jankos and Elyoya, those are way better jungler Trundle players than Zanzara is. So in terms of pure jungling, I have to put him D tier. If he is very good for the team's motivation, obviously that might give a boost to what Misfits players give in the playoffs. Like if you give this mental boost from a player like Zanzaro to a Vete or a Neon, and that outweighs the downside of Zanzaro's jungling, then it's probably worth it. I still think it's not really the case, but it has worked out for Misfits. So who am I to say? Just judging by pure jungling. Then we go to mid. Mid is the first where we have the S plus tier, which is Caps. Caps, towards the last few weeks, ramped up a bit again, started playing the outrageous Cap style. Now, obviously, he's not going to do that every game. He's also going to have his quieter games, but everybody will remember that Silence game that he played in the final week. Everybody will remember how he played in the lower bracket of the Spring Split playoffs and at the beginning of MSI. It was peak Caps once again. I think Caps is just a player who you can never count out in these situations. He said apparently to Dylan Falco himself that he was going to ramp up towards the playoffs. So that's what he did, and he performed very well. I think Caps is, he's not necessarily the best laner that we have in the LEC, but what Caps does incredibly well is finding opportunities to escape his lane, punish the opponent. I think he's excellent at that, and obviously if he's in the zone, there's no player like Caps. He's undeniably then the best. The peak of Caps is the best that Europe or like the Western Hemisphere has ever seen. And I do expect him to carry on with that performance in the playoffs. Maybe not every game, as I said, you cannot expect this guy to be pop off every single game. But if you draw like the line of the effort, he will be on the S plus tier for me. Then we have S is Niski. Now Niski, I saw in Euphoria people say like he's very good at laning. I think that's a bit simplified because I do think Niski's laning is pretty simple, as in he just keeps the wave stable, and when he wants to roam, he just very aggressively pushes in and then leaves his lane. But that's obviously fitting Mad Lion's style of letting Elyoya and Niski team up, roam, find a kill, and get the team ahead early. So that is not necessarily to discredit Niski, because what he does very well is timing those opportunities. He's very good at realizing and understanding, okay, this is where the enemy jungler is, this is where the enemy mid laner is, this is where we really have the opportunity to go. Let's find that kill. I think you also saw him in a few games this split. Play mechanically very well still. I think it was also a Silence game where he popped off quite heavily. I don't distinctly remember that. Probably should have looked that up before, but it doesn't really matter. We remember him from Fnatic last year when he had like an Irelia game that was insane, right? So he is still capable of playing carries, but I think the value for me most with Niski is the fact that he directs his team very much through his play and very actively finds his team opportunities to get ahead, which I very much respect. Then we have Larssen, could maybe also go in S tier. The thing for me with Larssen is obviously very good laner. Just in pure laning, he is the best laner that we have in the LEC. Very consistent there. I did take him off the S tier because he struggled a lot with the champion like Talia, which he himself also very much admitted, obviously, that he was struggling a lot. I think he is an excellent control mage player. It's just that when the pressure is on, is Larssen always going to perform? It's still a big doubt for me, even though obviously in the series against Fnatic in the reverse sweep that they did, he was insane. He was playing aggressive, so he has the capabilities. Just about bringing that consistently. That's what these playoffs are going to prove for me, and probably for him as well. Is he going to be? Is he finally really over those hurdles right now? Is he going to be able to step up? And I doubt that, to be very honest. He's also, he will always play the OP champions, or what the team perceives to be OP, but he's not necessarily always going to be insanely good at them. And the thing is that control mages, like I think Azir is going to be a big factor this playoffs, which might even get banned against him. So what is he going to do then? Overall, obviously, still very solid player. Very big fan of his playstyle in terms, not necessarily playstyle, but I would say that his playstyle is underrated by people. It's very, very dominant in his lane. It's just I need to see him find a bit more opportunities, and that's why he's A tier for me. Then in B tier, we have Viteo and Nugdar. people will wonder, why is Veteo in B tier? He is such a pop-off carry. Well, uh, I don't know where this got started, that Veteo is the EU Chovy or something like this. But Chovy is excellent at laning. Veteo is not excellent at laning. I don't know if you've seen his laning phase. He's just not very good at it. What Veteo is very good at is finding opportunities in team fights, or finding ways to get the kill, to very much snowball and to get in a carry position from the mid game onward. So that is why I still have Veteo in B tier. It's very serviceable, but his laning is a liability. If you remember the start of the split, he was getting caught out so much that well, I wouldn't say single-handedly lost Misfits the games, but he was a big contributing factor to Misfits losing many of their many of their 4 games. In the early, probably like all those 4 games, he was getting caught out, and obviously this is a team game, right? So probably should have had help from Zlatan or from Mursa helping him in the lane, something like this. But just his positioning in the lane is pretty poor, and understanding there. But there's undeniably the Veteo factor, that when he is put in a position where he can carry a team fight, he will do so, find the kills, find the executions, and win the team fights for his team pretty consistently. So that's why Veteo is still B tier for me. A serviceable player, definitely with a lot of potential in the future as well, if he improves his laning. But for now in these playoffs, I rate him B tier. Serviceable, probably gonna find a few good kills in some of the games that he plays, but I don't expect anything particularly insane from him, if I'm very honest. Nuke Duck, also in B tier. I think Nuke Duck is very underrated because of the role he plays in XL. He's not gonna be the big carry champion or the big carry player in XL, because they play around. They have Patrick in the bot lane, who is the designated carry. They have Marcoon, who can even carry their games. And Nuke Duck is supposed to be the glue between them. And I think he does that fine. His laning's fine. His team fighting's fine. His champion pool is very big. It's very flexible and is willing to play other champions. That's very good, obviously. So that's why I rate him pretty decently on the tier list overall. And then we have Humanoid in C tier. Very rough split for Humanoid. I think he suffered a bit from the same problem as Razork did, in that some of his ideas were decent, but Razork, or Humanoid and Razork just had different ideas of what the good move was. He very much struggled. He is a player who can step up when it matters most. So maybe that's going to happen. Maybe he will ascend and be a very strong player in the playoffs again, but I don't have very high expectations, because I don't think the meta shift is necessarily going to be very big. I don't think that the communication within Fnatic is going to be solved to a point where Humanoid is going to be able to be that leader again in the team, which people had hoped him to be. He was supposed to be the mastermind. So I don't think I think Humanoid it's just gonna suffer a lot in the playoffs. Individually, a smart player about some of his ideas, right? But also just communicatively, whatever. There's a lot left to be desired if you look at the way he plays in the lane. So I think that's going to be a struggle for Fnatic to deal with, as it is with many of their players. So we go to the bot lane. Yes, plus there, obviously, Tetoncito. I think Flakked's Duck throughout this year, I should say, has killed maybe not necessarily as well, because heading into the year was a bit of a bigger contributor to his brand and to what Flakked was. But if you look at a playoff scenario, obviously Tetoncito is going to be around and is going to provide that stable factor. It's obviously a world-class pet. I don't think that there are many pets that can compete with it. Maybe Mako's Catch, after which the Yuumi EDG Yuumi skin was modeled. I think that's another good contender, but otherwise Flakkeds are clearly S+ tier. No debate about that. Then in terms of actual bot lane humans, we have Neon in S tier. I think he was undoubtedly the best bot laner of the split. Super consistent in finding opportunities to get ahead in his lane. In team fights he carried well, but bot lane I would say is pretty stacked in EU. So you can say that this tier list is a bit more condensed in terms of the range that you have from the S tier to the B tier. I don't know what to say about Neon. I've praised him a lot about Best in on Best in the West, obviously, because he did so well. I think the one thing he might suffer from is the players around him not being able to adapt to a best of 5 scenario. But Neon should be able to do that himself very easily, and I don't think you should get punished too heavily on if your fellow players can step up. I do think you should get punished, like I discussed with Resurrect and Humanoid, for example, about not finding synergy with your teammates. But there's not always something you can do about mistakes that your team makes, and I think Neon is very much in that boat. In A tier, we have Patrick, Comp, and Unforgiven. Patrick, I expect to level up in the playoffs. He did not have the greatest second half of the regular split, but the first half was very good. I think he's going to have a big fire lit underneath his proverbial ass to perform well in the playoffs, and he's a very big carry player, so I expect him to step up there a lot. Comp, just been a very solid player for Rogue all split, and I do think that he's going to maintain the same level. He's been the most consistent player on Rogue, and my third vote actually for MVP. Once the ballot comes out, you can confirm that for yourself, where I think the other Rogue players had peaks, like highs and lows throughout the split. Comp was very consistent overall, very solid player. Unforgiven, I think Unforgiven's regular split was better than that of Comp. I think I voted it like this as well on the MVP on the ballot. I think so. It's a bit vague. Don't have the recollection, but anyway, I do think that in the playoffs, Unforgiven will still be a very good bot laner. I just think that in terms of stamina, this is a rookie, obviously, so in best of 5s, I do expect him to drop off a bit towards the later games in a series, which you don't blame him for, but you still have to weigh it in your assessment, in my opinion. So I think for Unforgiven, that is the biggest factor for me. I also am not sure if he's going to be able to adapt to curveballs. Obviously, he played a Karthus bot, so he threw the curveball, but if the opponent is going to throw a curveball, is he going to be capable of answering with a champion that he hasn't played at all this split, for example? You know, that is a big factor for me, not, you know, in why he's lower end A tier, but still A tier. Very good bot laner, obviously. A fantastic rookie year for this young guy. Upset in B tier, together with Flacket. Fnatic and G2 fans might get very angry at this. But I'll be very honest with you. Have you seen them play this split? Now, Upset, I rate B for a different reason than Flacket. So let's start with Upset. Upset in the spring split was a carry player for Fnatic. Had obviously a fantastic split together with Hylissang. Best bot lane in the region. But I do think that in summer split you could see everybody on Fnatic struggle a lot, and Upset was not stepping up to be the carry player until the final weekend when he got Zeri, and he absolutely dominated. He performed well there, credit where credit is due. But is he going to do the same in playoffs? I highly doubt it. I think Zeri is going to get banned against him, and we saw in the return game against Misfits for the tiebreaker, when he didn't get Zeri, it just didn't have the same impact at all. So I think if I look at last year's Summer Split playoffs, Upset stepped up and was one of the reasons Fnatic got through the lower bracket very well together. Like Niski was the big carry on their team then, but Upset stepped up as well to get them through the lower bracket all the way through the finals. So I do expect Upset to do something similar again, to a lesser degree though, because this split has been more rough for him altogether. So that's why I put him B tier. Now Flacket. In terms of raw bot laning, Flacket is pretty undeniably, in my opinion, the worst bot laner of the 6 that are in the playoffs. 7, I should say. Obviously, Tetoncito, no disrespect there. My duck. His duck, but you know, my dude, but like, whatever. It's a bad joke. We'll keep it in. I think Flacket is just a very good example of being exactly what your team needs, and it is serviceable, similar to Nuke Duck in the mid lane, where he's a puzzle piece. He just needs to be in his lane, play safe, not die. If he is put on a champion like Kai'Sa, he can carry. I don't necessarily think we're gonna see that, but he's fine. He's good. He's not a liability. He's okay, you know? It's fine. It's exactly what the team needs, because they play towards the top side. He doesn't need to be the carry, so he's fine. It's okay. That's why he's B tier. Serviceable, you know? So, then we have the support. I think support is a very interesting role in EU, because we have a very wide range of what these players can do. I'll just touch on, for example, Hylissang can be an S plus support, but this split has been terrible for him. Right, so now back to the top. Targamas has a very big champion pool, is very proactive on the map. I do think that during the regular split itself, he had a couple of off games, which is why I didn't put him as the best support, but he is also a player who stepped up in the lower bracket run for G2. Very proactive, very, how do you say that, very versatile support. Can do many different things for his team and knows exactly how to play them. He's a good roamer. Just a package, I think. He's very good. Kai'Sa, similar things actually. I think what Kai'Sa does very well is, for example, finding flank opportunities. I think Kai'Sa is very clever about those things. I think Kai'Sa is a big playmaker on champions that you wouldn't expect him to be a big playmaker on. Like, for example, Rel isn't necessarily a playmaker, but he can find very, when champion was still meta, he could find very clever flanks, set up the team incredibly well, and set up the play. So I would say he's the playmaker there. Overall, super solid support player, obviously. I think the one thing for me, I'm wondering how is the synergy going to be with him and Unforgiven in those later games, where I expect Unforgiven to drop off a bit in terms of his stamina. But overall, good stuff. Trimby and Mickey in A tier. I think Trimby is one of the few players who will pick basically anything to play support. He, is very notorious for being one of the few players who locks in Lux as support. I think that's good. I do think Trimby's biggest challenge this playoffs is like just going to be the choking factor. He seems like a player who does get nervous when the stakes are high. But overall, I think just in raw supporting ability, he's still just a very creative player. He swings pretty high, can also swing pretty low at sometimes. So, but I will say that the average for me is still an A tier player. Mickey obviously had a few very int games this split, and he also said himself that he wasn't always very good this time around. But I will say that for me, there's just undeniable that factor. You cannot count Mickey X out completely. At the same time, where he had some in games towards the end of the split, he had very good support performance at the start, and he's been in this scenario of being in playoffs so many times that I think it's very silly if you would just ignore the experience that he brings for him or with him. Then in B tier we have Mursa, and we have Hylissang, as in serviceable, the tier, right? Mursa, I think, needs to be a bit more experienced in playing professional League of Legends on the LEC level to grow further, because I don't think I think he has a longer growth like timeline than 1 year. We have seen him develop. He is much better at finding the right timings, as Veteran and I have discussed on Best in the West. But I do think that overall, if you would say Mursa is just fine. He's what Misfits needs. He has some times where I'm like, okay, it's a bit questionable in terms of finding the right engages or being caught out as a player, but he makes up for it by at the same time just flashing forward and disabling the enemy and setting Veteo and Neon up for success. Hylissang, also B tier. Could be an S plus tier, as I said a few minutes ago, if he's in shape. He has not been in shape. In fact, he's been pretty terrible. this split, in my opinion. But it's a similar thing to Mickey X. Hillesing is so experienced, so I will never count him out completely. That's why I'm still putting him in B tier. The big thing for me is that what are he and Upset going to be able to do together? And in the lane, they've been pretty weak. And I'm mostly actually looking at Hillesing, who was always trying to punish the enemy for overstepping. Is he going to be able to do that? He hasn't been doing that so successfully, but then I'll again say I'm never going to count him out completely. So now I'm just going to go straight to the preview and discuss my thoughts on the teams. Rogue versus Mad Lions, it's a very big question mark for me. I do think Mad Lions is going to win this, and why do I think they are going to win this is because they have a clear pattern of play in the clear strategy of how they want to win the game, and I think Rogue does not have this. So if I look at, for example, the Niski Elyoya duo, and also Kaiser joining in, or them playing around Unforgiven, they can all do this. Rogue doesn't necessarily have one strict plan of who they're playing through or which two players they can play through. It's always, okay, the laners do well, and as a team, they hope that they can win in the late game, which they have done fairly effectively. I just think that in this match in particular, Rogue should probably be playing through their top lane, because Armut is the weakest link on Mad Lions. But I don't think Rogue is going to be able to do that because they haven't really played with carry tops, and I don't think Malring is going to be able to help Odo carry in the situation. You also need Larsen to be on a roaming champion, which is different from his usual laning oriented champions like the Orianna, like the Azir, which he does very well, as I discussed a bit before. So if they have like a Talia or a Twisted Fate, maybe that's something that Rogue can do, but I don't expect them to do that. So I do expect Mad Lions overall to just, with their mid-jungle synergy and with their bot lane, I think actually bot lanes are fairly even, but it's just how the team plays together. I do expect Mad Lions to win this series. It's going to probably be very close, and I hope that we're going to see some curveball picks from these teams, especially from Rogue, because they seem to have been a bit more open about experimenting with those. So who knows what's going to happen there, but overall, I think Mad Lions just has the better plan for victory, and also can be a bit more versatile in how they want to execute that plan. Misfits versus G2 probably shouldn't surprise you that I'm going to pick G2 there, because in terms of experience in the best of fives, in terms of versatility, I expect G2 to be much, much better. Misfits, if they want to win, they probably will have to play very hard through their bot lane and get Neon to an unkillable one-shot kill for the against the enemy state, which I don't think it's going to be possible for them. And I don't, if you have Veteo versus Caps, which is in itself a very interesting matchup in the later stage of the game, but in the early stage, I think Caps is going to be much better than Veteo. I also think Jankos will punish Zanzara in the jungle very easily, and G2 is just going to be allowed to play through the bot lane, through the top lane, relatively easily, in my opinion, because they've been very practiced at doing that, and I don't think Misfits has the capability of shutting that plan down. Maybe they'll win one game. It's best. It's essentially just a bunch of best of one, so that can happen. But in terms of consistency, I think G2 will have it with a very versatile, very practiced, and very experienced lineup. Then we have XL versus Fnatic on the final day. Obviously, an elimination game. Loser of this is out, will not go to Worlds, and the winner will need to win one more best of 5 after this to make it to Worlds. So XL versus Fnatic. Fnatic is, in my opinion, a complete shambles in terms of its team. When it mattered in the final week, they were able to put it together but it was still with mostly individual performances. Because we saw in the first game, they had a very good early game and they were able to snowball it very well. But then in the subsequent games on Saturday and Sunday, it was once again a player like Razork stepping up. Upset, obviously, on his very performances. And I think that in a best of 5 scenario against, like in playoffs, those inconsistencies will get punished in a longer series. So I do think that XL is going to win this. XL obviously had their own struggles. as a team barely made it into the playoffs as well, just like Fnatic. So it is going to be a very close series. But I think for Excel, the biggest part for me is that you could punish them a lot by playing through the top lane. And I don't think Fnatic is really going to do that. They did that very well in week 5 of the regular split, where we saw Wunder and Rezzorg teaming up, and they were super consistent. But after that, that synergy completely dropped off. So I don't think that they're just going to be able to replicate that in the playoffs. Maybe the past 2 weeks they've only practiced this, and this is how they'll gun for the win against XL, which would be a viable strategy, but I just doubt that they have the consistent performance to do that. Meanwhile, in the bot lane, Patrick and Mickey are better bot lane than Upset and Hylissang in this part of the split. It's just wondering for me a bit how this team is going to perform in the best of 5 scenario, because we've also seen XL go on a big loss streak, so but it's similar to Fnatic, where they had very big loss streaks. So it's all about mental. In the end, as I think Perk said, right? Best of 5s are about mental. It's about stamina, and I think XL has the better mental, better team overall in terms of environment and being able to deal with something like this than Fnatic. So that is my preview. Thank you very much for watching. It was a long one. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what you think is going to happen with your tier list. What do you agree with? What do you not agree with? I'll hopefully be back with Veteran for a Best in West next week, if I can find him alive once again, wherever. And stay tuned on this channel, because I'll probably have an interview, or maybe 2, to give you from the LEC playoffs. I'll be in the studio once again. It's very exciting. So thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for more content.